Okay, again, welcome everybody. Welcome to day 2 of RMI Connect. For those of you who weren't with us yesterday, my name is Thomas Meredith. I'm Vice President of Marketing, and we're glad you're with us as we continue today to examine the strategic value of resource management. Today, we're going to dive into technology and resource management automation. So our first session will look into making sense of what users want to elevate their RMO. And we follow that with a technology panel session discussing what the future holds for RM automation. And we welcome KeyedIn Solutions, Kimble Applications, Mavenlink, and Upland Software. Very excited to have them on the line for our panelist session. We're going to have a big crowd here, so I'm letting folks get logged in here. I'm stalling a little bit, but let me cover a few housekeeping items just so you guys are all aware. Again, I mentioned this yesterday, we're trying to keep this interactive as we can in this environment. So please, if you have some questions, enter them in your questions panel, and we'll get to those in a Q&A session at the end. We are also recording today's webcast. Friday, we're going to try to get on an email with today's webcast recording and yesterday's recording. So you have access to both those sessions, and that will go out tomorrow. And in your handouts panel there, we have made a copy of the deck available. So if you want to download a PDF copy, you can do that as well. Okay, as I mentioned, we got a big crowd in. They are settling in, it looks like. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to welcome RTM Consulting Managing Partner, Marc Lacroix, to start us off. Marc, welcome. I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Thomas, and hi, everybody. This is Marc. For those of you that don't know who I am, I said I'm a managing partner and founder of RTM Consulting. Spent my whole career in professional and consulting services, and also, of course, been with the RMI since its inception as well. So I look forward to covering a topic today that's near and dear to my heart, and that's really, to me, the intersection of process, function, and technology. And I think we have a good agenda for you here today with some panelists in the second half of our segment here that's going to be pretty interactive, and I look forward to hearing from them. But I first wanted to spend a little bit here talking about my views and the things that we're seeing from the RMI around technology, and really in theme with the overall RMI Connect of looking more strategically and the value of resource management. So essentially, I'm going to be talking about digital transformation, and we're hearing quite a bit in terms of the buzzword, but I want to bring it as it relates to resource management, because really digital transformation is shifting the thinking of business users, and really it's not about what is essential, what we need, but really now more what is possible. And so again, trying to identify and get across to you all that what digital transformation is doing to us, where we sit today, you folks out there, is again, we need to be thinking more about what problem are we solving today versus what problems more broadly are we solving and what is possible out there. And that's really what digital transformation is providing us. And I really want to highlight that for you. Now, I have a tendency to like to bring random real life things into the business world, and usually to the point of kind of makes my wife groan a little bit. But one of the things I always think about is when I first, I don't know if anybody out there is a biker. More specifically, if you do any trail biking or mountain biking, one of the truisms of mountain biking is that if you look at it, you'll hit it. And that usually pertains to obstacles like a rock in the middle of the path. And so if you've ever been riding a mountain bike and you see a big boulder right in the middle of the path, if your eyes fixate on the boulder, then there's a high chance that you're going to hit the rock. And so that's a term called target fixation, and that's actually kind of wired in our body. And so what you're taught in Mountain Biking 101 is you have to actually look in the direction you want the tire to go, not at the rock. But of course, our tendency is to look at that alarming rock in our way. And so how am I relating this back to us in the business world? Well, what I'm saying is we have to fight our instincts of trying to solve the immediate problem right in front of us. We live day-to-day pain and frustration with technology or process or culture. And what I'm trying to get you to do, at least in this hour and a half, is step a little bit beyond the immediate problem, the immediate crisis, and more think about what's the longer range solution here? Where are we really trying to take this? And again, going back to my intro, what's possible? And so again, I ask you to take your eye off the rock, look to the open space to either side, and let's try to navigate to the other side together. And that is for Gary Ward. A tribute to you, Gary, for your excellent transitions that you use on all your presentations when you do RMI work for us. So what is digital transformation? Well, you know, it is a bit of a buzzword, you might say, just like e-commerce was and is a buzzword, just like cloud, just like blockchain. These are all things that when you're at a happy hour or cocktail parties, they're talked about, but I don't know if but there's a certain period we all go through to say, I think I know what it means, but I'm not really sure I know what it means. It's kind of this esoteric word. Well, let's talk a little about what it means. I mean, the simplest definition is that it's using technology to enable better business outcomes. Well, okay, that's somewhat still a little bit generic, you might say, but this really isn't just about a technology play, really. It's fundamentally changing how business operates and how we deliver value for our customers. So the way I interpret it is that technology is no longer a utility or a generic infrastructure to us, and it is simply an enabler. It is a differentiator, and that's really what digital transformation means. Is it's attacking the areas that provide us business differentiation and allow us to either beat our competitors or gain more market share or all the above. And so that's the new way to think about technology. And of course, from the diagram you can see, it's essential that we're integrating the people and process part of that, because if you don't regard that, then you are just putting in another appliance, you're putting in another piece of technology. And so what we're also saying is simply automating a manual process is not enough. So we're no longer just simply doing left to right process flows and saying, you know, automate that step by step. Again, talking about what's possible, we've got other places we can go with this technology, and that's what we're going to try to highlight for you and explore. Think of this quote by this gentleman who I've never heard of, but I really like the quote, and that is, when digital transformation is done right, it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, but when done wrong, all you have is a really fast caterpillar. And so as Wade Little, our technology practice leader, always likes to say a lot now, is like, let's just not implement fast caterpillars, right? Let's do better than that. Let's make butterflies. And so follow me with that and say that I think you can tell the difference there. A little bit of data behind this movement. The left side is a little cryptic, but I'll just tell you what you need to take from it, which is there's a lot of money going this way. If you talk in terms of follow the money, the capital markets are investing in technology that is enabling digital transformation, because again, it's a higher correlation to business value. And so whether it's IPOs or investment rounds and things like that, the money is going here fast. And even from a microeconomic point of view, inside of your companies, the money and the budgets are shifting. IDC says that 40% of all tech spending inside of companies is going to go towards digital transformation, $1.3 trillion globally just in 2020 alone. And so, you know, why is that happening? You might say, well, we've always spent money on technology and we've always been implementing technology. Well, I would argue probably cloud has been a little bit of the enabler of this phenomenon to happen, because we've really reduced the need to spend a lot of money on maintenance and operations and infrastructure, and that has freed up, you might say, some money to really redirect more towards business critical systems, customer facing, customer support systems, and things like that. And so I think that has helped unleash this digital transformation where we now have a little bit more flexibility in our capital spend. So again, bottom line from this slide is a lot of money is flowing into this area. And so, you know, we as consumers and users of technology, you know, we need to have our bowl at the trough here to make sure we're getting our fair share of all this great investment that's going on. So what is the opportunity? We have to take advantage of all this technology and the momentum around digital transformation. So I'm now going to bring this down into more of the resource management world. First is the maturation of the PSA, PPM, and RM applications and the emergence of new and strategic features. We're seeing a lot of innovation in this area. We've seen it now for the last 2 or 3 years, and it just gets exciting more and more. I know I sound a little geeky when I say that when I see some of these leading technologists, like the panelists we have, I get a little excited to see what's in their next release, because in some cases they're surprising us. Say, wow, that's pretty good. I'd never thought of that, or that's pretty darn innovative, and I look forward to seeing how that's going to be used in the field. So more and more, it's not just a Me Too capability. It's really getting to be pretty interesting. And again, I think you'll get some insight into that today. And I'm going to go into each one of these in a little more detail. The other that gets a lot of attention too is data. I think we, as part of the resource management community, we are very reliant on data. So this feeds well into what some of our most critical needs are. And of course, we're going beyond just data. We're getting more into business intelligence, and a step further with artificial intelligence as well, and really starting to incorporate data, not just to be able to see things, but to be able to drive our decision making as well. And also, technology is an enabler for integrating stakeholders and connecting ecosystems. So what I'll talk about in a little bit in subsequent slides around these 3 points is that our resource management is not on an island. We are very interconnected with every other part of our organizations around us that both we serve and that we're a part of. And so we need technology. We need innovative ideas for how we can more seamlessly interact and work with these different teams, different organizations that are around us to make our life easier, and again, to better innovate the way we operate. So it is a journey, and we, like any journey, we have to figure out, where are we? Where are you? And so as I go through this build of slide, I'd ask you to think about your environment and your company, and you can think of it more broadly as your company overall, maybe the overall department that you're part of, and then think of resource management as well. But let me take you on what we see as been the journey in the industry. So it starts with what we call status quo, which is we have technology that is really just helping us maintain the status quo. So if you're an external facing delivery organization, you probably got basic time and expense capture, just so you can get invoices off to your customer. If you're internal, you're probably using it to do some broad-based capacity planning at the quarterly level, just to know, do we have enough or not, very much at a high level. A lot of Excel, not a lot of integration. So we've got point solutions, we have manual interfaces between. Excel fills all the gaps, and everything's fairly bespoke. Now, you might say, this is me now, this is me before, this is me a long time ago. Well, 30%, according to and I've integrated RMI's research into some of this, 30% of companies are still not using automated tools for RM. So what this tells us is that in terms of status quo, while I'm not polling you all, that potentially up to 30% of you are operating in this status quo mode. The next leg on the journey would be more in an what we would call automated, and that is that you are using a PSA PPM as your central piece, showpiece of your technology. I'll call it the ERP of services and delivery, but it's really the central hub for how you're operating. Now, you may use it quite widely, you might use it a little more narrowly, but it's the master of a key central parts of your projects and your people and things like that. There is a higher degree of integration, but not necessarily full integration. In some cases, it's maybe not all there, but at least there's some level of integration, whether it's either on the front end or on the back end, just to try to, again, make things a little more seamless, a little more efficient, a little less manual. And we're starting to use all this transactional data that we're collecting and capturing centrally, and using it to start to do better reporting and some decision making around that, because now we've got all this great information and we have an opportunity. Well, what does our research say on that? Well, for those using the tools, 40% will state they're not very effective. So let's just say that of the folks that are automated, there's just 40% or so that are still not there. There's still some gaps, shortages, not fully meeting what you all believe are needed to run your resource management. And then also kind of a corollary data point too is that still 70% of you will admit that spreadsheets still augment some of the processes. We see that whether it's potentially, well, I'm not even going to go into the various use cases, but we see that a lot, that while you may have a proper application driving the core of the business, it's still a lot of spreadsheets and augmentation around it. And that's a little bit of a warning sign that there's more work to be done to really get a better solution in place. And so where are we trying to get to? We're trying to get to more transformed, digitally transformed, if you will. In this case, we've got good alignment of process and automation. So we have automated, I'll say, progressive or proper processes. We see a lot of automating, improper processes. So we've got good processes and we've automated them well. We've allowed, or at least we have a infrastructure that allows better integration of customer, business partner, and us, so that we can more seamlessly work outside of our firewall and be able to exchange information, data, function, and interact more seamlessly. And we're really starting to use data in a more advanced way. We see essentially the introduction of more use of artificial intelligence, more advanced business intelligence and analytics into our operating environment. And so what do we see there in the research? Well, 60% of respondents want better reporting and analytics. I mean, there's always been, and I'll go into a little more detail there, an insatiable appetite for more functionality here. When we've been asking the question probably in the last year and a half around artificial intelligence, we're starting to see this perk up a little, and I've got a slide on that. I'll show you a little bit more about that data result. But let's put a little more into context of where you are, and we'll show a little bit more of this data here too. So again, I'll go back and say, where are you and where do you want to be? And again, when we think of digital transformation, again, as being a journey, and again, what I don't want you to do is settle for status quo, and what I don't want you to do is be content with just some good automation. The vendors that are participating today are really, their heads are here on the right side of how do we get our customers transformed, and they're putting stuff in their products and they're thinking about it in their product development shops about how to do this. So just a little bit more information, and some of there's a few different pieces of research. This one's a little more fresh, and so I wanted to highlight a few things that came out of this, and then I'm going to get into a few of these points that I was making relative to digital transformation and you all. But again, we've talked about effective or not effective. There's still there's still a lot of room for improvement. Let's just say, the way we always kind of paraphrase when we see that not everybody's absolutely enamored of where they're at today, and that could be a lot of different reasons. You've outgrown your original implementation, or a lot of things contribute to that. Technology and inhibitor is more pronounced in professional consulting services than in enterprise and IT product development agency organizations. I don't have a direct observation there, although I think that with PSCS, you think of customer facing, and that puts a little bit more of a strain, more tax on trying to get your automation working well. We're creating invoices, so if we have an incorrect invoice, that's a big problem that ripples through our operation. And so that's why I interpret probably technology is even more of a factor in success in PSCS because of some of the commercial facing aspects of those organizations. And then the other takeaway is more seeing a shift where the automation is needed. And this is really what I want to highlight, is that we are seeing a shift. I've seen a shift. When I look at past, now we have a track record of doing these research surveys, so I can see what you guys were saying 2 and 3 years ago, and the shift is we're moving from tactical to more strategic, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when you see that 80% want more support for forecasting and capacity planning, this is that from a process standpoint, this is the more strategic thing we see our more mature customers focusing on trying to get right versus some of the basics. And also reporting continues to be high in terms of where you have the greatest need to overcome technology as an inhibitor to your progress. So let me drill into that a little bit more and just show a little data around these functions, because I brought up the point of we are shifting towards wanting less tactical, more strategic. And again, I'm seeing that in these questions we're asking you around technology. Now, if you look at this comparative picture, and I put both what the professional services consulting services, that's what PSCS stands for, versus say IT, product development, and agency, those kinds of internal facing shops. There is a little bit of a difference between the two, but what we see though is that the priorities are in the areas that involve strong data management. So when we've got a lot of data process, a skills inventory or capacity planning, that's very data intensive. And so that has continued to be strong areas where you all have said, this is where we need the most automation and the most help. The shift has been a downward shift in, let's call it, project staffing and even skills development planning. So these are areas I would say are more tactical in nature. They're day to day. Hey, I need to staff somebody tomorrow or the next day. A lot has been invested in making that as functional as possible, but let's admit it, it's tactical. It's not as strategic. So we get some efficiency, but these areas function. They're not necessarily broken. And what we really see, of course, is a voracious appetite for reporting, dashboards, and analytics, and that has persisted over time. And anecdotally, I could say that a lot of these technologists are investing and continue to try to improve in this area. Okay, so that's a little bit about call it the shift around innovative capability, what you're demanding, and then we'll talk more with our panelists about what they're doing about it. Now, I brought up also the point of data. And so what are the possibilities? Again, I want to highlight the ability for you to put into context your environment and where you're at and how we see the evolution of using data and the maturation of that. So your first goal is to get the data in one place, right? So if you go back to the status quo to automated, that's part of that jump from status quo to automated is get your data in one place. So when you have a PSA or PPM that is prominently in your environment, that's a big step towards getting there, because now you can see the possibility of, wow, I can get all the necessary information. I've got the processes that allow that data to come in. Everybody's contributing, and we are establishing some governance so that the data that I do have is valid and has some integrity to it. So that's step one. Step two is, now, how can I be proactive with my data? And this is where BI and analytics come in. Is like, it's one thing to have the data, it's one thing to be able to look at it in a two-dimensional way, but how can I do more with that? What metrics do I want to see? I've said this before and in other presentations, manage with the end in mind. What do you want to see? What metrics, what trending might you want to do to run the business or monitor the business? Well, if you have the data in one place, now you have to start to envision, how do you want to use that data and be proactive with it and get forward looking with it. Well, you might say, Mark, wow, that's nirvana for me. You mean there's yet another step to go? Yes. The next and final step, which is more digital transformation like, is how to use the data to work for you. So in other words, the data's there, but think about that through the use of artificial intelligence or machine learning, things like that, is how can that data be read by an algorithm or something and basically monitoring it without you looking at it. So you don't have to pull up the daily or weekly report to find out what's wrong. Guess what? The system can tell you that something has tripped the wire and you should now look at this. And so that green is where, that's when I talk about the possible, that's where we're going, is we try to find these things that can help you in looking at the data when you're not able to. I told you I'd come back to the AI piece, and I wanted to highlight that here because AI is starting to creep in. I said 4 to 13% in the professional services consulting. We're starting to, the data says, you told us that up to 13% of you are starting to dabble with AI. less so in enterprise IT and product development, probably more like 4%. And where are we using that? You can see predominantly it's in forecasting, and that makes a lot of sense. Very data intensive. We need to try to see where things are going, and ideally we have artificial intelligence that can help us do that. And so to me, capacity planning is one of the higher use cases for something like that. But we also see uses in applications around staffing. Of course, the intelligent ranking of who are good fits for these staffing assignments. Skills and supply management, helping me understand based on everything out there, help me learn from that. And also, don't forget our employees, time analysis, burnout. I mean, we can look at time data and we could learn some things about people that are potentially burning out. So there are a lot of use cases. I'd say 2 years ago, I sat down and tried to blindly think of some use cases, but now they're becoming more and more obvious to us every day. And then the last area I'd highlighted earlier that digital transformation and resource management kind of intersect is really bringing together stakeholders and ecosystems in a more seamless way. You know, you might say, I'll say we're not on an island, right? That's kind of my big point I always make when talking to resource managers and resource management organizations is we're not an island. In fact, we have a lot of stakeholders, a lot of things to deal with. And so what role is automation helping us with that? So we know a lot of our immediate constituents are the managers that we're serving, even our PMOs, but of course, we have a lot of interaction with the sales and or planning process. And so getting that interface, that integration, when I say interface, I don't just mean a technical interface, I mean, the logical and human interface that goes with that as well. I mean, there's a whole pattern and process that gets defined between these organizations. And of course, automating those should follow that path. But again, how are we leveraging technology to more seamlessly integrate to sales and or planning? Same with finance. How are we passing on or tying into finance? Finance can be a very dominant organization in many of our companies because they're the ones reporting the revenue. There's one keeping track of our budgets and costs and things like that. And so the more we can make our information available, integrate them in our processes, the easier it is to get things done. Now, you may view some of these like HR finance as secondary stakeholders, and I would agree. But again, they are still huge stakeholders in the overall operation itself and big opportunities to get them tied in. And certainly of the immediate circle, let's not forget our people and the staff as well. How integrated systematically and technologically are they? My sense is that these are the least cared for constituents in our automation. They're the ones we think about the least, to be candid. And I think there's huge opportunities with your resources and staff in the areas of digital transformation and automation. And then the last one I'll pull up is your external ecosystem, your partners, contractors, and gig economy marketplace. So these are, the gig economy is not familiar, but it's more, the freelancer, the folks that aren't necessarily tethered to any one partner or contractor, but are just out there. So there's a whole ecosystem of third party that very important to us as RMOs that we have a huge opportunity still, big gap to drive more automation, and a lot of this digital transformation can flood into this area as well. So hopefully what I've done is, as you've gotten on your resource management mountain bike, I know that we think of the day-to-day. I think we think of the challenges of the information we have or the function, or it takes too many clicks to get from A to B, and I get that. But I think what I've tried to get you to do, of course, is take your eye a little bit off of the immediate obstacle and look a little bit down the road, work with your folks that help you with automation, work with vendors like we'll have on the panel here very shortly, and let's see what's possible. And let's really keep an eye to the theme of this RMI Connect, which is how do we continue to do things that will make our resource management office more strategic. And I think that good enabling technology is going to be a key part of that going forward. Okay, so with that, I want to pivot now to lighting up our panel. And so what I'll ask is our panelists to now join me, I should say, and be part of this conversation. So they're all going to turn on their video. I think mine's been already on. Oh, there's everybody. Okay, great. So we're gonna, we got everybody. So we're gonna continue this conversation, and who we have on, I'm gonna ask each of them to introduce them, spend a minute introducing themselves and their company. If you're not familiar with their company, certainly give them a little background about themselves. And then we're gonna, I've got to tee up a few questions and get them sharing their points of view on some topics related to what I just covered. And then of course, we want to try to be able to integrate some of your questions as well, either as we go, or certainly budget some time at the end as well. Okay, so Jared, if I could start with you to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Well, hello everybody. My name is Jared Haleck, and I'm SVP of Product here at Mavenlink. Just a little bit of background on me, perhaps, and I'll just give you a bit of background on Mavenlink for a minute or two. My background, prior to Mavenlink, I spent a little over a decade in the sales automation space. And the reason I bring that up is there's a lot of parallels to what sort of occurred in that industry, perhaps a little earlier than what is currently occurring in this industry around this idea of sort of automating what was once thought to be an art into a science. And a lot of that had to do with, you know, the rise and capture and capacity to store data and so forth. And so Mavenlink is a really kind of similar problem to solve. The resource management problem is a very similar problem to solve, and we're really focused on that here at Mavenlink. A bit on Mavenlink, for those of you who don't know Mavenlink, I'll introduce you to Mavenlink for just a second. Been around for a long time, founded in 2008. You know, I'd probably describe maybe just 3 attributes really quickly. You know, who we're targeting, and sort of what sort of underserved needs we're focused on in the market. You know, who we're servicing in the market are organizations that are fee-for-service organizations that are essentially delivering projects external to their organization. We made a decision that as we kind of looked at, you know, use cases across project delivery, that there was enough distinction in the way that you would, particularly on resource management, you know, want to enable that particular function, given it being externally delivered projects versus internally delivered projects. So that's where we're focused. And sort of the underserved need that we run up against a lot in the market really swirls around the topic that we're talking about today, around how to sort of gain the most leverage on, you know, key business outcomes through the orchestration of people within the organization. And so that's where we've really been focused for a number of years. And so there you have it. That's my introduction.
All right. Thanks, Jared. Rafat, how about you go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rafat Hilal, Senior Director of Product Strategy at Upland Software. I've been in the business with PSA and PPM for a long time, over 20 years. Actually, was part of writing the first book on PSA in early 2000s, and then the rise of the project workforce later on. And definitely I've seen massive progress and change in the industry, and it keep evolving as we see, and it's sort of hitting the maximum, then we see more change. So very exciting times, very new things coming, and definitely looking forward to our conversation. Just a quick introduction to Upland. Upland is a leader in cloud solutions that enable organizations in the digital transformation age. Thousands of organizations and over 1 million users use our solutions in different areas, such as connecting to their customers and keeping close ties with them on digital and social media, optimizing sales team performance, effectively managing projects and service delivery, optimizing IT costs, and automating document workflows. So a bit on Upland PSA, that's where I spend most of my time, plus PPM. So Upland PSA helps consulting organizations and embedded services organizations to automate workflows for resource management, project management, and financials. We also extend collaboration beyond the service delivery to the sales and sales automation team with with proposal and SOW automation, as well as with customer success by measuring customer experience and the value they're getting from our deliveries and sharing this across the organization. And of course, finally, with all those changes, knowledge management is becoming more and more a critical part of the service delivery and IT delivery as well. So we embed knowledge management and capture accrued knowledge within the organization as part of our solution. And looking forward to a lively discussion.
Great, thank you. Jody, can you go next?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm excited to be with you all today here at RMI Connect. I'll just give you a little background on me and then on KeyedIn projects. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Jody Koch. I am a senior implementation consultant with KeyedIn projects. I've been doing that for a few years now, but my background is actually in engineering, product development, and manufacturing. So while I'm now a consultant, I work in professional services. I'm no longer working as an engineer. I do very happily still get to solve problems every day, just working with my clients throughout their entire KeyedIn projects journey. KeyedIn projects, for those of you who aren't aware, is a Gartner recommended PPM solution that can really help you fully automate every aspect of your organization's project delivery. So from forecasting demand for resources across your pipeline and your in-flight projects, all the way through to accurately billing for the completed work that your resources have done. KeyedIn projects really allows your team to be focused on the important things for your organization, like driving up utilization, profitability, and productivity. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. And last, certainly but not least, Marc, can you introduce yourself and Kimble?
Thank you, Mark. Yeah. Hi, everybody, and thanks to Mark and the RMI for inviting me along today. Just a quick introduction to myself. I'm a co-founder at Kimble, a PSA vendor. I spent, as you can probably guess the way I look, I spent the first 20 years of my career helping grow a variety of professional services firms, I guess like a lot of the people listening out there. And in the 10 years since then, at Kimble, I kind of travel around the world meeting customers and prospects, learning about the kind of challenges they face in running the various aspects of running a services organization. And that's kind of, I think the justification of that is I spend so much time with them that it sort of persuades me that if ever I'm tempted to go back to running a services business, that I shouldn't. It's just too tough. So I've got a lot of sympathy with people. And but at a serious point, that's kind of where Kimble was kind of created from. It was from our kind of own experiences where we felt at the time, going back 10 years, there kind of weren't adequate solutions to help those kind of people responsible for running organizations to do their jobs more effectively. And I think as Mark described in his presentation, that's about creating a solution that can automate kind of the, as much as you can so that you're kind of taken away from the day-to-day and you can do the more interesting value-added stuff, which is kind of what we set out to do. And generally kind of create a solution that's more forward-looking. So it's about bringing that kind of greater predictability to the way that you make decisions both at a personal and an organizational level. So it's kind of, it's like running the business, through the proverbial windshield rather than rearview mirror. And that's very much been a sort of mantra for us right from the beginning to now. But Kimble itself can kind of do just, more than just resource management. You can help pretty much all aspects of running organization, from managing pipeline, obviously doing the resourcing piece, ensuring that projects are delivered on time and budget. And if you are in an organization that's ultimately going to charge for that time, it's making sure that the billing is accurate and you can collect the cash. But our customers generally either buy all of our solution or some of it. And I'd say resource management is probably the key area that people tend to focus on. And what we hear from our competitors or from our customers is that one of the reasons they choose us is where they choose just one part or all of the solution is around the resource management functionality. So that's why I'm very pleased to be here today, and I look forward to the presentations.
Great. So as everybody can see, we've got very established students of the game here. Both not only have come up with where they're at today, but they've been living this for quite a while. So I think it'll be very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with lobbing the first question in. And Jared, you're going to be first up. I want to ask, in kind of reaction to my slide here, how would you characterize your customers and prospective customers, because you're constantly talking to prospective customers as well, in terms of where do you see they are on this digital transformation journey, and more specifically, I guess, as it relates to the RM area. So as you talk to your current or prospective customers, where do you see these folks on in this spectrum?
Yeah, thanks for pulling up that slide, Mark. I think sometimes, especially from a technologist, perspective, you have a tendency to overestimate where people are in the journey, right? So I think it's easy for folks to sort of, especially for folks like us who are sitting here on the panel, to sort of believe that people are further along the journey, because we want to keep pushing the envelope of what's possible, and that's obviously a good thing to do. But I think the fact of the matter is that from my experience, at least, and the experience of our company, is that as we see our customers kind of developing and growing with us, and as we see customers coming into our pipeline who are prospective customers, I would actually kind of characterize where people are at on the journey somewhere between your step 1 and step 2, right? Between status quo and automated. And I think that's probably changed over time, right? Years ago, when we first started, we would have seen people coming in at sort of the status quo, and probably even before that, right? They didn't really even have good time tracking solutions or expense tracking solutions.
Right. There's a zero over there, right? Nothing.
Yeah, it's sort of like this hierarchy of needs, right? And you have to solve the levels of the hierarchy of needs sort of one at a time. But where I think we're at today, I think we see more and more people who are actually somewhere in between the status quo and automated, right? We do still see customers who come to us and are asking them to solve, the whole kind of problem with them, because they just haven't put a lot of digital infrastructure in place. But it's more and more common, and perhaps even the majority of folks have some sort of digital infrastructure, but it's piecemealed throughout the organization. One of the struggles that they have is they don't know how to consolidate, back to one of your other points, around getting their data in one place. They have data siloed in so many systems. It's difficult for them to sort of, even imagine moving, from automated, through to automated into transformed, right? I think everybody intellectually has this idea that that's where they want to get, but that's a pretty difficult, sort of intellectual leap to make if they can't sort of organize themselves around, a single infrastructure or a set of pillars in their infrastructure that can get their data organized in one place. So that's where I would say people are probably at from our perspective.
I think I heard the audience do a collective sigh of relief to say that, okay, I'm not, everybody's not as far along as I am. So,
I have a funny, I was just going to say, there's a customer once who, we were kind of painting, this is in a previous life, painting a similar, a picture of, what could be. And he said, hey, that's a great Lamborghini you just showed me. I need a wheelbarrow. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think people are probably somewhere, between those two, those two first stages.
Yeah, Rafat, how do you see your customers?
I agree with Jared's assessment. I definitely see quite a bit in the automated space. Many customers are moving from status quo. Those are many of the deals we see now in terms of customers they're not satisfied with status quo. So they're looking either for their current vendor to take them through the journey, or look for another vendor to take them through the journey. So it's actually it's kind of a warning sign for us vendors when and we do actually have a similar assessment of our customers for items where we go from, we call them disconnected to automated to transform to agile. So, and the agile piece is, as Jared said, because there's a big jump between having your data in one place and having your processes seamless to really having your data actionable, and sort of the silos are down and decisions are being driven from pure data. So, we definitely see a lot of automated. There is movement to transform, and there's quite a bit that we see, especially around how customers view the pipeline of a project, dealing from opportunity through bid, through winning, through an execution phase, all the way to customer satisfaction. And actually, some of the areas where we're seeing significant sort of activity is in the embedded services space. So as a lot of those product companies with embedded services transform so that they can actually help their customers with digital transformation. The service departments are becoming far more critical and strategic versus before, where they were sort of helping in getting a product installed, getting, you know, a couple of reports done. Now it's a lot more strategic. They're looking for services with data scientists to help customers mine their data. You know, they're looking for services for building connectors and integrating their ecosystem. So that's an area where we're seeing a lot of customers looking to go into a transformed, you know, with the agile ability of really using data to be nimble, to be able to work using their data. Now, as I mentioned, you know, we see quite a few status quo companies coming in, and I've seen a big jump in the appetite for change. You know, 10 years ago, the main game was controlled change. You know, going through a transition step by step. You know, you install your time tracking, your expense, you do your billing, your invoicing is working, you start doing your resource planning, and now the appetite is much higher. And even with the pandemic and sort of the, you know, the financial uncertainty, the digital transformation is happening. And we're seeing companies that want to jump a couple of hops. You know, I'm dealing with an opportunity now where a customer has a timesheet tracking, you know, manual resource planning. They're moving their financials to another system in the cloud from in-house. They're changing their whole CPQ process for, you know, their services and products, and they want to go straight into a transform mode. They want to integrate their systems. They want to make sure the process is working all together. And in a way, looking at it in a bigger picture versus looking, you know, okay, I will install a PSA or I'll install a financial system, then look at PSA. It makes it easier for them. Of course, it's a bigger change. And that's where getting some of the buy-in and really understanding digital transformation. And as you mentioned, it is more than implementing systems and technology. It is a big change in the organization. So having that, you know, business case and understanding the value from an executive and how resource management is critical for your financial success. It's no longer about, you know, maintaining sort of utilization. It's really an important part of your financial success. So it is an area where we are seeing progress, and definitely, hopefully, more and more towards the transformed aspect.
Okay, very good. Jody, what do you think?
You know, similar response really to the others. You know, a lot of our customers tend to be between that sort of status quo and automated phase, although, you know, everyone wants to move into that fully transformed area. But, you know, I'm a consultant, right? So I'm interacting with clients every day, you know, on their KeyedIn implementations. I'm directly involved in their configurations, provide guidance along the way, so on and so forth. But I'd actually like I can share an example from one of my clients that might help sort of explain where our clients typically are and how we get them to that next step. So I recently was working with a pretty large healthcare client. It's a large sort of hospital group here in the United States, and they came to us at the beginning of the year because they needed to replace another tool. They needed to do it quickly. They were really using, it was an ISTM tool that they were sort of using to manage their projects, but they'd really outgrown it, and we came in to replace that tool. And the focus was really on projects and project-related data, just in KeyedIn projects instead of their previous tool. Obviously, fast forward to March, we all know what happened then. You know, COVID really started to ramp up, and, you know, no surprise, it's a hospital system. They happen to be located in a COVID hotspot. They needed to suddenly, you know, redeploy all their resources, reprioritize projects. You know, any plans that they may have had for 2020 were basically just tossed out the window. So, you know, I was working with them every day. we quickly realized that in addition to help managing their projects, they really now needed help prioritizing and reprioritizing potential projects and understanding where their resources were needed. Suddenly that was far more important than it had been at the beginning of the implementation. But because we'd already done the groundwork in establishing processes around project management and building out their portfolio structure, they were really able to quickly take advantage of the flexibility and resource management automation that KeyedIn offers today. We'd already worked on centralizing the resource pool, which was really helpful. It allowed us to just sort of layer on the automation pieces that we have today. And this is really representative of most of our clients. They're generally not that far along in resource management, certainly not in resource management automation, but it's one of the reasons why they buy our tool, frankly. We work with them to really standardize processes, centralize their resource pool, and then we add on things like capacity planning and automatic supply of resources to projects to really begin to tie together that tactical day-to-day work management with their more strategic view of their portfolios and resource capacity. So, that's using a story to explain where we are, but we are looking at further automation of these functions and investing heavily in this area as well.
Yeah, and I've heard all three of you kind of say that it's a process. You don't nail it in one shot. You've got to start and mature and progress together. And I think that going from 0 to 60 is not necessarily what we're saying here. It's that you have to have goals and objectives, but you're not going to get there in 8 weeks. So a lot of times our prospective customers, how fast can you implement? Well, whoa, that's not what we need to be thinking about here. So, Marc, how would you weigh in on this?
Well, I think I'd follow up what you're saying, Marc. I think it's kind of with hundreds of customers, you kind of see that broad church, and we actually have a job in our mentioned we have a role in our company called Chief Adoption Officer, whose kind of job is to take you on that journey, or his team is. And one of the funny bits I always say, and I get my salespeople don't like this, I say going live is the first day of your journey. Quite often there's a focus around it. It's a whole process after that. I think in terms of resource management, I think we've seen over the years, and all of us here are sort of broader set of functionality we bring. We've kind of seen the business driver being other areas generally. So kind of the financial management, the CRM, whatever it might be. And what I've seen more recently is much more of a push around resource management. As I said, maybe even buying resource management standalone, but at the very least looking at resource management as being the kind of driver for the transformation. And sometimes it's the driver that then everything else follows later down the line on that. And I definitely agree with you, Marc, I think in your presentation that I think too many organizations in terms of process and systems around resource management are kind of too immature compared to the other parts of that in their organization. And I think the ironic part is some of the biggest benefits you can get are actually in the resource management sphere. And kind of the only other thing I want to add is something I really liked about your presentation. I know we talked about before, Marc, is this idea that automating a manual process is kind of not enough, I think, as you put it. And I can give a real practical example where so many times I'm asked by people in demo situations, can you show me in your demo how your system can support exactly what I do today? Exactly what I do today with manual processes or systems they know aren't right. And what ends up happening is they buy a shiny system from us or somebody else, and the danger is that they kind of don't take advantage of what this new technology can give you, and end up kind of keeping the way they think before. And a simple example would be, is a classic organization kind of has that weekly resourcing call where historically everybody's kind of comes on it. They update where the data is, where people are, what the latest status on project staffing requirements are, and then they kind of make all the decisions. But when you've got the kind of real-time data that systems can offer now, they're still having that weekly call, and they're still waiting for that weekly call to make the decisions, rather than going, I can make those decisions in real time. So I think it's not just recognizing that you're on a digital journey, it's kind of adopting processes that get you along that journey faster.
Yeah, I think that ties into a comment or question brought up by a participant here too, is this idea that this is not transactional. So I guess if we think of digital transformation and this journey, is it's not a transaction. And so if there are signals inside your organization that say we're going to be done in 8 weeks and everything's going to be great, that should send off a red flag that all these panelists are reinforcing that, as Marc just said eloquently, that's just the beginning of your journey. It's getting the technology lit up. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to evolve. And I think that the comment one of the audience said is it a danger in moving too quickly from A to C? And I think everybody would agree, yes. So there is a certain amount of patience and curation involved to allow the organization to move with this transformation. I think one of you said this is not a technology event, this is a business event, and has to be more viewed that way. So I'm also getting a couple of points brought in about data, and I'll bring this up again as well. And I think to some degree reacting to even the first part of getting the data in one place, but I'll ask kind of what I'm going to put out there. And Jody, I'm going to start with you. Is, a lot of emphasis and need around data, and of course I painted this picture of you might say the evolution of how we use data. And so if you could give your thoughts in terms of a couple things. One is, how is your solutions enabling us to be able to kind of harness this data? And really, what I would say the preponderance of what I'm seeing from our audience is they're very concerned with quality of data. And so I might ask a little more emphasis on this getting data in one place. Who's responsible for it? How do you ensure quality? That seems to be weighing on the minds of folks out there, is how do we ensure we don't get garbage in and garbage out, and that we can do things to make sure that we can capture it effectively and have a good data set to begin with? Because I would think people would argue if you don't have a good base of data, all this other stuff is not as useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. I mean, there's a reason we need the data. It just allows us to build algorithms that actually predict things in a way that they're actionable. The bigger the data pool, the more likely those algorithms will be able to identify potential bottlenecks and make accurate predictions. As far as the data itself, it's within KeyedIn today, we're capturing data around resource usage. We can look at things like availability and utilization and productive utilization, all of that, along with, of course, incoming resource requests, and compare to actuals and start to look at how those actuals stack up against the plans. That sort of speaks to the question about how do we ensure that we have accurate data. When we're looking at what was the initial plan versus what actually happened, we can start to use that information to make better predictions in the future. Okay. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question? I don't recall.
Your customers have concern with data integrity in terms of where all this data is coming in from, different users. Any suggestions on how you solve the garbage in, garbage out problem?
I always like to say, the tool is not going to solve, it's not going to solve your problem. It's just recording the information. So a lot of it really is, process and defining processes clearly, whether it's inside the tool or outside of the tool. But people still need to have conversations and talk to one another. We can build scenarios within our tool and start to really predict what might happen. But we still need people to talk and follow processes that are outlined internally. And we work with clients all the time on defining those processes for them in order to ensure that the data that they're looking at is accurate.
Yeah, and we as RM, right, we're always on the absolute receiving end of all that, and so our organizational influence dilutes the further out we go. Let me pivot to you, Marc, in terms of this topic of data and how your solution kind of addresses being able to help customers enable the use of it systematically. How is your system designed to help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Mark. I mean, I was interested to see your presentation where it was kind of talking about the area of forecasting, capacity planning, reporting. So kind of use of the data was really key. But I sort of identified the real flaw in that is that assumes that the data is absolutely accurate. And we've built things like, automated resourcing, even be able to go back with a bench and, we look at a bench and tell you what projects people can go on. So lots of really clever stuff. But if the data underlying it is not of sufficient quality, then kind of people don't trust it. And I think that's one of the problems in the services business general. Why sometimes, go back to your last question, why that adoption curve is slowed up is because people, kind of don't believe what they're seeing, so they don't make the actionable decisions based on that. So I would see it's really understanding the processes. I think too often there's kind of this idea of a handoff between systems and things. And you've probably, our subway map, Mark, but if you haven't, look at our website. So when we first looked at our product, we recognized, having been on the side of the fence, that actually things like resource management isn't done in isolation. It's a collaborative thing. And your richness of information improves as you go down the sales cycle. And it's not about getting all the information in one place and then when you get to the end, kind of bringing it all ready for operations. It improves as you go along. So the subway map that we've designed kind of displays how those interactions work. So the analogy is somebody gets on a car in a train stop, they go to the next stop, they may be working with somebody on that train, they may go off on another line, and somebody else carries on, somebody else comes in. And that's actually how you go about making those decisions. And that's been sort of fundamental to the architecture of what we're doing. And I think to answer the question, I think it really starts with right at the start of the process. So that pipeline has got to be tightly integrated to demand. You've got to have this real time link between supply and demand. And I see too many times people kind of having this pass over the fence, this handoff thing, whereas actually you've got to have those integrated together. And that's kind of what we've set out to achieve. And, and I think we have, and that's kind of what people are seeing. And it adds to that, collaboration. And I kind of go, the other side of it finally is that closed loop piece. There's got to be a benefit for people. They've got to see the decisions they made. Was that right? Can we then change our behavior? So everybody along the piece is contributing a small piece of information and they're getting benefit from it. Therefore, then they're more likely to keep that data up to date. And that's what I see in the field if you get that right.
I think that's a key point right there. I wrote down, sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think to your point is you use the data actively and show why that data matters to these people is, I think, a key part. And again, it has nothing to do with the system, right? It really has to do with our culture and our process. So, Rafat, in the area of data, how would you weigh into this discussion around leveraging data, but also the concern that the audience has around integrity of data?
Yeah, I think probably using Excel is one of the biggest, evidence that data quality is a problem. And most of the time, it's not the data is not there. It's just they either don't trust it, or they're not sure of how it came about. So they get the Excel sheet and sort of scrub the data, and so the whole manual process begins. And it is a challenge, and part of solving this is putting in controls in place. So workflows, for example, for requesting resources, where you have a process in place where project managers request, resource managers approve, some communication goes on audited, so that you can track what is going on. Another aspect is connecting systems. One of the areas it's simple, but I see often a lot of issues is PTOs and leave management. They're being done in your HR system. People enter it in their timesheet. It doesn't update your calendar, and sort of it creates that level of noise between projects. Someone didn't realize someone's going on vacation. So that type of integration helps. Same thing with holidays. If you're a global organization, being able to really capture that information and put it into your calendar and availability of resources, so that that the system has taken care of the basics. Now you focus on getting your sort of project staff, getting the right people on the right project, And the third area is definitely using the data. So, and that's where I see a big difference between PSA and PPM. You know, PSA data matters a lot more in the sense that it is going to impact your financial reporting, your margin calculations, your revenue recognition. There is, you know, consequences to bad data, and that definitely works a big, you know, aspect of controlling the information. In PPM, it is getting better, but because it's a higher level usually of allocation of resources at a role level, and it's, you know, sort of maintained not on a weekly basis, most of the time, you know, bi-weekly or monthly, because you're just tracking capacity and making sure you have enough, you know, availability to do work. So and then that data being used for decision support, whether it's, you know, around calculation of trends. You know, what am I doing on my EAC? You know, if I'm doing a fixed fee project, is that trending well? Is that not trending well? So being able to baseline your data as well, so that, you know, you're sort of tracking history and history that you capture with business rules that, for example, prevent you from, you know, saving a baseline if your resource allocations exceed your budget, or things that you can put in place as a business to make sure you are qualifying the data at entry point, rather than someone having to go and double check. Now, in terms of putting the data together, and that's another aspect, because, you know, we do work in a connected world. There's, you know, there's CRM data, there's financial data, there's HR data. So being able to have processes for replication and for sort of, you know, a cloud-based supporting of data warehouses, I think it also helps in making your data available in a data warehouse. Again, it ensures the quality and the availability of, you know, the level of detail needed in the organization.
Right. I just want to highlight one thing you said that I totally agree with, and that is consequences for the data. You know, we tend to be victimized by the data, if you will, because we get stymied in our ability to do our jobs, knowing that the data is not right and there's some problems upstream. Well, again, not to create internal wars, but the great point being made about consequences of the data. We have to make people aware the consequences of poor data, because what we're doing is valuable to everybody else. We're not doing it for our own selves, right? We're doing it for the good of the organization. I think we do a poor job in the RMO world, to be candid, about, you know, kind of sharing consequences of bad data. And so I think that's an area we all can improve. So Jared, why don't you kind of weigh in on your viewpoint of this topic?
Yeah, I think I'd start by underscoring two things that have been said so far. One is that you know, I used to joke about this, just given that I've spent a lot of time around this sort of idea of, you know, automating, you know, turning art to science through AI. And one of the things that is worth noting is that the math has been around for a long time. You know, the first neural networks were, I think, created in like the late 1950s. But we just didn't have the capacity to store the kind of data and organize the data needed in order to leverage the math, right? So that's sort of one thing to maybe just think about, is that's how crucial this is. Like, don't worry about the algorithms. Like the data is actually the hardest part. The algorithms have been around for a long time. And so that's step number one. By the way, there's plenty of innovation on the algorithms, but step one is the data component. So that's point one I'd underscore. Point two that I'd underscore, that I think has been said a little bit here, is you have to give people an understanding of why it's important for that data to be captured in the first place. Just to give you a brief example, there's a capability that we offer in our solution that, you know, helps you, you know, recommend and you know, the right resource, you know, to the right projects based off of a whole host of factors, one of which is skills. And when you show that to a customer who might be, you know, earlier in the sort of journey of the maturity curve, if you will, they start to realize, oh, well, that's why I need to capture that data. That's why I need to kind of put more rigor and emphasis around how that data is captured, because I now really begin to have a vision. I really understand the vision of what that's going to deliver to me. So that's kind of 2 points that I underscore. There's a few other areas I think worth mentioning around things that vendors like ourselves are working on that really sort of are focused on trying to get this data, the quality of data, and organized in a location that's useful. One is I think it's somebody mentioned, I think Rafat mentioned orchestrating data from external systems. I think that's a really important point. And so you have to be thinking about what kind of platform are you going to use to orchestrate data. And I think anyone who's in our business, if you think about your slide from your presentation, Mark, that resource management's really at the hub of all of this. And in order to do this correctly, we have to orchestrate data from systems within our PSA solutions, but also from outside of our PSA solutions. And that also, yeah, there it is. And it also requires that we have a point of view on what data is required and what data isn't required. One of the other kind of techniques I would suggest that helps to increase both the willingness of people to give you data and give it to you in sort of in a high quality fashion is to really think through, start with the end in mind, think about the result you're trying to achieve, and then try to figure out the least amount of data that you're going to require from particularly a user. Systems are a little bit easier. You can do star kind of like downloads, bulk downloads from systems, but from people are a little finicky about this. And what I found is they have to understand the intrinsic value to them for why they should be, entering data into a system, and then it can't be onerous, right? So I think it's incumbent on not just us as technology providers, but also a lot of, I think, the folks listening as they're designing their processes and their systems to really try to get to the heart of the data that they truly need based off of the end in mind. And then once you have, begun to take these steps and sort of solving these problems, it's only at that point that you can really, begin to sort of leverage the power of that. And I know there's probably more to be said about that, but we think, I'll give you just two really simple use cases. One is forecasting. I think it's been talked about here. The better the data you're using to forecast, what your resourcing needs are in the future, the more accurate you're going to be. And then the other one is a topic that we've been thinking a lot about, leans a little bit more into the AI space, which is optimization. You begin to sort of have enough data to begin to sort of answer, some questions around optimization that previously are really difficult to answer or pretty much impossible to answer if you don't have good enough data to start with.
Yeah, good points. And I think, again, I highlighted from what you're saying was going to be a corollary. Again, I had probably 3 comments come in from the audience about garbage in, garbage out, the who and all that. And you really covered it well, Jared, and that is stop focusing on the who, focus on the what as much, meaning made a statement, what's the minimal amount of data that I need to get my job done, and think about, try to minimize that impact on you, but don't fixate on the who and the bad behavior, focus on defining exactly what you need. And I think we underemphasize that or don't pay enough attention to that because I think the cleaner the ask is of the information, the simpler it is, the more chances of success in that case.
Yeah, it really becomes, another way of saying is it becomes almost a UI UX problem, user experience problem, where you number one have to identify the value to the user, and then number two, try to set up the cleanest way possible for them to enter that. And that's an area where we spend a lot of time focusing is in that area of user experience, because we know that this is just a crucial problem that a lot of our customers face. So
yeah. So
I've got a good anecdote for you. I've got a good anecdote for you, Mark, here that you might have heard is kind of one of our prospects that became a customer. They actually had 250 to carry on with Jared, 250 pieces of data that they transferred across. They had a very complex spreadsheet algorithm that transferred it across. And they used it for so long that the person actually retired who'd written this. So that was the catalyst for them to change things. And when all they did was simply go around to everybody and say, which of those 250 does anybody actually use? And there was only 50. And it's actually gone less than that ever since. But it was kind of, that's the start. We don't ask ourselves, as Jared said, that question is, what are we doing with this stuff? What are we measuring what matters? And that's a good starting point, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So wildcard question, and Jared, you started to get into a little because we had a question earlier on saying, what what are maybe some specific examples of where AI could be or is being applied in RM? So maybe just a simple use case or two. And again, now we're dealing with data integrity here, which we're kind of further to the left, but I'm going to pull us to the right for just a minute and say about again, what's possible is, if anybody wants to just give one or two example use cases that either you've seen implemented or you see very quickly around the corner being more mainstream.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on that, Mark, real quick. So I'll start with this idea that, what is AI good at that humans aren't good at? Humans are actually really bad at multivariate weighting across more than 3 variables, right? And when you think about resource management, it's a giant multivariate weighting problem, right? And so it takes a lot of time. And yes, we're doing it across more than 3 variables. We have to think about the constraints. We have to think about the people. We have to think about the projects. We have to align all of these things together. And that's a real challenge. And that's one of the reasons why it takes so much energy. And in many cases, we can only get so far. And so I think where the sort of frontier is particularly as we're thinking about is this notion of optimization, right? So how can you leverage what machines are good at? Machines are actually really good at this multivariate weighting problem. And we think of it like an optimization exercise. And it's all about trying to get to optimum given all the constraints. You have travel preferences, you have margin that you have to be mindful for. You have this idea that you're also trying to staff your people on projects that will keep them engaged and help them develop in their career. And it's this balancing act of trying to manage these outcomes. And that's a problem that I think is really well suited for AI. We sort of think about it in terms of optimization, and so that's an area where there's a lot of work that we've done recently on that topic.
Okay. Other panelists want to weigh in on use cases they think apply for RM, for AI?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in with one example from one of our clients. We're looking right now at KeyedIn at AI primarily as it relates to project behavior, but there's some resource management AI coming as well, and obviously, project behavior and resource management, it's all very much interrelated. So, I always like to tell client stories. One of our clients is, they're a really large East Coast retailer. I'm not going to name names, but a lot of you have heard of them. And they actually, today, 90% of their projects are deemed successful, right? So 90% of the projects that they're running meet their objectives within the constraints that this client has defined, which I think is pretty phenomenal. But their CIO wants to get them to a 95% success rate. Right? I mean, that's amazing. But this client, no matter how they slice and dice the data, they find they just can't identify the problem soon enough. By the time the problem occurs, it's too late to get back on track. So, how do we get them to that 95% benchmark and maybe ultimately to 97%? Well, we're working with them on making improvements in their success rate by using AI. Okay, so we're building an algorithm with them to help them identify their bottlenecks earlier, just so they can do something about the problem before the problem actually impacts their projects. An algorithm AI allows us to process so much more data than a person can, and so our goal is really to be able to, for all of our clients, based on past behavior and really using customer-defined criteria, predict for our clients where and when those future bottlenecks are likely to occur, and do things like suggest project or task start and end date changes to reduce conflict, but eventually to make resource-related suggestions to the same end. So maybe it's a particular individual resource, maybe it's a role where you need to build up your capacity or bring in contractors. We hope to build out KeyedIn enough to allow us to help the client identify those problems before they occur.
Yeah, a couple of scenarios. One, actually, we're working with a customer right now. It's about a bit to do, not data quality, but the subjectivity of estimating, forecasts in the future. A public company who sort of uses fixed fee projects to estimate and forecast revenue in the future. So we currently have a way to sort of put a probability on revenue, especially further in the future, to understand how does this forecast translate into revenue. So what we're working with them is a way to automate that by looking at some of the information regarding, is this a new customer, an existing customer? Do you have an outstanding PO, not outstanding PO, some data around risks associated with those projects. So taking that to be able to predict and provide some information to help the resource manager as they provide those estimates, which are crucial for their financial reporting, to have a more global view, because as was mentioned, sometimes we just don't see the whole data, and that's where AI can help. It's really looking at multiple aspects of your information that you have available for you, and then giving you that prediction or giving you that hint of maybe you should look at this a bit further. Another area that might be of interest and we're looking at is optimizing sort of bench time. Sometimes you might see, you look 3 months out and there is, low utilization to certain resources. Then you can sort of look at that and match it to opportunities that you have in your pipeline and see if you can work through some of that with your sales and sort of to really push those opportunities to meet your capacity.
Yeah. So I guess my add to that, Mark, would be for a plug for Kimble, we already do that kind of reverse optimization of bench. So we already have that facility. So you can look at your bench and it will automatically suggest pylon to you. But I think to bring it back down to earth, because I think this idea of automation and using some of the machine learning is all really good and it's stuff that we're working on, those engines. I think actually the challenge in growing a services firm is much more close to home. I think you have a lot of attrition, you have people moving over, experience. As you grow, you need more experienced people. And I think, the common truism is there's not enough experts to go around, the sort of people who can interpret that data and make those decisions. And whilst AI might come to that eventually and replace them, kind of in the short term, what you need to be doing is kind of more what I call augmented intelligence. So using the processes, if you understand the process, I talked about the subway map that defines that in our organization, the way we set up, it's defining what we think is going to be the next action and prompting through sort of guided analytics, as we call it, prompting people to kind of make the next call, the right call. And so you're kind of trying to elevate the level of your less experienced people up to your more senior people. So you're not bottlenecking where every decision has to go right to the organization, where there might be at the top of the organization, there might only be a few people. So I think that's probably, if you look back at your crawl, walk, run kind of analogy in terms of the level of maturity, I think the sort of the walk, the second stage is getting everybody up to that level, and then we can start looking at some of this further on. So that's kind of where I think people need to take as a practical next step in their evolution.
Hey, Mark, if I could just add one additional thing to Mark's comment and to the others, is that I think it's important to remember that this topic around AI, because this is a very sort of people-oriented affair that we're talking about. This is really we're talking about decision support, right? Perhaps there's a day where we trust a machine to do all of it, but just to give you a really quick example, we talk to resource managers all the time who say, I actually can't put some of the things that I know about these people in a business system. You know what I mean? And so there's still, I think what I would just want to emphasize is that the AI, the frontier for AI, at least on the near horizon, is to support our decisions, help us get a little bit more accurate, as a starting point, and then we have to start putting our puts and takes on the table, because there's just more that we know about context at this moment around our businesses, right? So,
yeah, very good, yeah. No, I think what I pulled from the feedback coming from the audience too, again in this virtual setting that we do, is versus hand raising is again really that more pedestrian concern of how do we get the data in well, and I think you guys addressed that very nicely. I think I thought we might spend a little time more futurist, but I think we blended the what is possible, but again I think maybe a little bit of the boulder staring at the bike path is a little bit of that quality input of data, and I like to think we you guys came up with some good thoughts and suggestions around that, and so I'm pleased with that whole dialogue there. So, folks out there, going to be going to conclusion here. So if you had any other final point, I think I've managed to integrate some of the questions that came through as I went. So unless there was any burning thing, I'm going to actually start to bring us to close here. What I first want to do, of course, is thank the panelists. You guys were awesome. Again, I knew that the level of experience you guys have, both not just with your current product companies, but just your past in doing this work and really knowing what our audience is living and going through is going to be very valuable. So again, I really appreciate you taking out time of your busy schedules to be in front of this audience. And I know that giving this information of all these folks, so people in the audience want to follow up, have further discussions. I know all these folks certainly would be more than happy to have an interaction with you and talk more about any issue that you found interesting coming out of our discussion. So again, thank you. Thanks to everybody. I also wanted to highlight that, again, we're bemoaning the fact that we'd love to be doing this in person. We normally would be at this time, but we will be doing it next year. And this is really, if you weren't part of yesterday, this is really an abbreviated agenda that is really just a slice of what kind of content we cover normally at our live symposium. And so we do have that scheduled. It's for next year's, basically these exact days, 23rd, 24th in Dallas. So never too soon to sign up, but just keep that on your radar screen, get that into your budget planning for this year. It's not too expensive. It's just a trip and a little bit. So just to encourage you all to make sure that you plan for that and make sure that when it comes around, you're able to go. And then last, for RMI Connect, did want to thank our sponsors for the overall program. And these are those sponsors here. Sorry, I'm moving my screen around so I can see everybody in order, but we have KeyedIn, Mavenlink, Tempest Resource Prosimetry, Kimble, and Upland. Again, we really appreciate your support in being able to provide this kind of forum and this information to our audience at the RMI. And I hope everybody gleaned some good benefit from this and overall from our two-day program. So with that and with a minute there, I will say that we're done for our program. And again, I think if anybody needed to access this information, it will be available. You can, again, just follow up through the RMI and contact us if for some reason you're having trouble accessing it. But thanks everyone for your participation and have a very nice rest of the week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
panelists.
Bye.
Bye now.